Hello and welcome to the Academic Lens. I'm your host, Daniel Lee, and today we're diving into a crucial conversation about diversity in filmmaking. Joining me are two distinguished guests who bring unique perspectives into this discussion. First, we have Professor Tegan Murphy from Yale's Film and Media Studies program. Welcome, Professor Murphy.
Thank you for having me, Daniel. I'm excited to be here.
And I'm also excited to welcome the acclaimed film director Yuki Chen, whose recent works and studies have hinted at the important conversations about representation in cinema.
I'm really glad to be here, Daniel. This is truly a topic close to my heart.
Actually, what do you prefer I call you?
Just refer to me as Yuki. I'm more than fine with that.
Well, today we're exploring a complex topic that's been generating a heated debate in the film industry recently. The fine line between meaningful representation and what some people call forced diversity. On one hand, many minority groups are underrepresented. For example, in a recent article I've read by the Common Sense Media, they highlighted that while the Hispanic population makes up just under 20% of Americans, they account for only less than 5% of roles in films. This stark difference highlights why conversations about diversity in media are more crucial than ever.
Yeah, I've read that article too. These numbers only tell part of the story. When we look at other underrepresented groups, such as Asian Americans, similar trends emerge.
Exactly. While many film companies have taken steps towards diversity, I believe there's still significant work to be done to ensure our screens reflect the true, rich diversity of our world.
Yeah, actually, I've seen both of you have closely studied and researched the patterns in how this diversity is being implemented in modern filmmaking, particularly regarding authenticity on screen. Hence, today I thought it was a good opportunity to share some of our findings with the viewers. So let's start with our first major finding. Yuki, we've observed that many film directors seem to approach diversity as somewhat of a checklist rather than authentic representation. What have you noticed about this?
It's funny, but also quite sad. I recently sat in a production meeting where someone literally had a diversity checklist. They were like, oh, we need one person of color, oh, and like another LGBTQ plus character. And I'm just there thinking to myself that they completely missed the point.
That is quite sad. And this is a critical issue we're seeing all across the industry. My recent research at Yale, we've documented numerous cases of what we call checkbox diversity, or more accurately, tokenism, where studios add diverse characters simply to meet perceived quotas without considering the deeper implications.
A clear example of tokenism in the film industry can be seen in the character Lucas Sinclair from Stranger Things. I read this article from Meta about tokenism written by Bianca Padilla. Lucas was the only person of color in the main group, but his character really doesn't develop, and the storyline does not explore what it's like to be a black teenager in the 1980s. This really shows that diversity can sometimes be superficial if it doesn't include authentic representation. As the author Will noticed in her article on tokenism, if the so-called diversity doesn't benefit the people it tries to represent, then it's just tokenism.
Definitely, you've exactly hit the point. Well, it shouldn't be like grocery shopping. These, of course, include the controversial Snow White movie and the recently released The Little Mermaid movie.
That's unfortunately the sad truth of the film industry. When watching films throughout the past couple years, we find that the majority of diverse characters lack character development. They often exist purely as background elements or to merely serve the main character's story arc.
Just last month, I reviewed a script where every minority character was written so generically that they were interchangeable. No cultural uniqueness, no diverse voices, just there to fill spaces.
This raises an interesting point about the impact of such representation. How does this checkbox approach affect audiences, Mr. Murphy?
Well, the impact is quite significant. Our research shows that superficial representation can actually be more harmful than no representation at all. When viewers see their culture reduced to a stereotype or just a background decoration, it reinforces feelings of marginalization.
I've actually seen this firsthand. After one of my early films where we admittedly fell into this trap, I received letters from viewers who felt their culture has been reduced to window dressing.
Let's move on to the second discovery. In an industry that shapes cultural narratives and influences millions of viewers worldwide, We must find methods to encourage authentic storytelling and break down harmful stereotypes. Without representation in key creative roles, we risk continuing a narrow worldview that fails to reflect our rich, diverse society. Professor Murphy, does your research cover this?
Oh, yes, it does. When we lack diverse perspectives in writers' rooms and production teams, we end up with what I call the white lens problem, where stories are filtered through a predominantly white viewpoint, often missing the nuances of culture.
Let me share an example. On a recent project, before we brought in culture consultants, our script had a scene where Chinese family dinner were serving fortune cookies.
Yeah, I can see how that leads to problems. They aren't even Chinese. Well, they're only Chinese by the Panda Express standards, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, the statistics support this. A recent study from the University of Southern California's Annenberg Inclusion Initiative highlights this issue. This study has found that while on-screen diversity has increased by a huge portion in the last decade, behind-the-camera diversity has only increased by a bit.
Could you elaborate on how this behind-the-scenes representation affects the final product?
Yeah, of course. When the behind-the-scenes producers, especially the writers, who write the entire script lack diversity, they sometimes subconsciously project racist stereotypes due to lack of knowledge on a specific race.
I agree with you, Professor Murphy. It's like trying to write a symphony without knowing how to play any instruments. You might get some notes right by chance, but you'll miss the depth that comes from the real understanding.
Now, let's take a quick break to thank our sponsor, Universal Studios. Make sure to go and check out their latest movie, Twisters, starring Glenn Powell and Daisy Edgar Jones. The movie is about a retired meteorologist and storm chaser returning from retirement and finding themselves in unlikely and dangerous scenarios. Throughout this podcast, we've been solely looking at the disparities of diversity in the film industry. However, some people find that there have been successful outcomes incorporating effective diversity into filmmaking. Do you have anything on that, Mr. Murphy?
Well, yes. Although there has been a steady increase of the so-called diversity, what is it really worth if they are merely being hired to tick a box and please the public eye? These increases in actors mean nothing until more directors and writers are hired who are well-versed in various cultures who can help properly represent the intricate practices of these distinct cultures.
I completely agree. Until the film industry can recognize that we don't need more characters to play the part of a stereotype with no character development, there simply can't be any significant steps towards cultural diversity.
Alright folks, we've gone through a lot today and I think it's about time to wrap it up. A couple of key points to keep in mind from today's discussion are that pleasing the public eye and ticking off boxes is not equivalent to genuine representation. True diversity in film goes beyond just casting. It requires storytelling, cultural understanding, and diverse voices behind the camera. This matters so much because media shapes how we view ourselves and others in our society. When younger generations see themselves represented accurately on screen, it validates their own experiences and helps create a more true and inclusive society that allows for them to feel proud that they are different. But when representation is reduced to mere tokenism, it perpetuates stereotypes and further marginalizes the minorities. The path forward requires diversity at all levels, from writers' rooms to executive offices in production. Only then we can create content that truly reflects the diverse world that we live in. Thanks to our special guests, Professor Murphy and Yuki Chen.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much.
This has been the Academic Lens. My name is Daniel Lee, reminding you to keep thinking critically about the media that we consume. Join us next week for more insights into the world of media and culture.